I walked past my parents' bedroom and finally reached my father's study. I quietly closed the door and sat down in front of the safe. I'd known the password for a long time because my parents never thought it was necessary to hide anything from me. I didn't hurry as I punched the password in and opened the safe. I thought there would be bundles of bills inside, but it was empty. I froze in place and stared at the empty safe for a few seconds because I knew that there had always been quite a lot of money kept in that safe. I hadn't expected such a turn. I'm Martha, and when I was a child, my life was a real paradise. I was spoiled. Dad and Mom adored me ever since I was born. They treated me like a precious crystal vase and fulfilled my every wish faster than I could speak it out loud. Whenever I pointed at a toy in a store, they would immediately buy it and bring it to my room, even if it cost like a new phone. If I didn't want to go to bed, I was allowed to stay up and watch cartoons. My parents kept saying that I was the smartest, most beautiful, most special girl in the world. But everything changed when I turned 10 and Catherine joined our family. She was small, red, and wouldn't stop screaming. From the very day my parents brought her home, they flipped a switch. They spent days playing with Catherine, feeding her, dressing her, rocking her, talking to her. I was getting pushed into the background more and more often. I just sat in my room or did homework all by myself. Sometimes, I worried my parents had forgotten my name. At the same time, they treated Catherine as if she was the queen and they were her personal lackeys, ready to serve her as soon as she made the tiniest sound. One day, I was pulling textbooks out of my backpack at school when I heard something drop to the floor. I looked down and saw a diaper? Catherine must have put it in my backpack. My classmates saw it too and burst out laughing. Some of them made jokes, and some made baby noises. Even Sarah, my best friend since first grade, couldn't help but laugh. I ran out of the classroom. The teacher, instead of putting an end to the circus, shouted after me, "Hey, you forgot your diaper." The laughter only got louder. I was a laughingstock at school that day. Everyone pointed at me, whispered behind my back, and not a single person tried to cheer me up. I was sure that Mom and Dad would take my side, and as soon as I got home, I hurried to tell them what had happened. But they were too busy taking care of Catherine. They fed her, cleaned her, rocked her, and didn't have any time for me. We'll talk later. Now isn't a good time. You're in the way. In the end, I felt quiet and went to my room. I realized I would have to deal with everything myself. From that moment on, I got madder and madder at my parents by the day and did everything I could to make them notice me. I turned on loud music when they were tucking Catherine in. I threw tantrums in the middle of the living room. I pretended to be sick, complained about non-existent problems at school, and made up conflicts with my teacher so that my mom and dad would pay attention to me instead of Catherine, if only for a little while. But they only got annoyed and mad and told me not to bother them. After that, they would go right back to fussing over Catherine like I didn't exist. Meanwhile, Catherine kept reaching up to me, smiling and crawling after me. Sometimes I caught myself smiling when I was around her, but each time I wanted to be gentle and spend time with her, I remembered my parents and got angry again, so I pushed my sister away and left. Subscribe to the channel and like this video, and I guarantee you'll make a new friend soon. Time passed. By the time I turned 16, nothing had changed. My parents still ignored me and spent all their time with Catherine. They drove her to lessons, read fairy tales with her, discussed her victories, while I just existed next to them, like furniture. I decided that if they didn't want to see me, I would at least make them notice the consequences of that. I stopped doing homework, skipped tests, and got bad grades, but my parents didn't seem to see it. I stopped cleaning my room. All sorts of things lay scattered across the floor, and my bed was littered with clothes. There were dirty mugs and plates on my desk, but no one noticed that either. Catherine sometimes came to my room and tried to clean up, but I did not accept her help and always chased her away. At some point, it finally became clear to me that if I wasn't seen or heard at home, there was no point in acting like a good daughter anymore. I decided to do something my parents would definitely not approve of. I tried to find the worst crowd I could fall in with in our neighborhood. It turned out to be quite easy because teens with painted skates, worn-out backpacks, and an air of trouble around them always hung out near the old shopping mall. I talked to them after school. In a couple of weeks, I already felt like part of that strange, loud, and dangerous gang. I changed my style and bought ripped jeans, huge hoodies, and combat boots. I used dark eyeshadow and sneaked out of the house so that my parents couldn't ask where I was going, even if they wanted to. I came home late, almost at night sometimes. If my parents said something, I pretended not to hear them and just locked myself in my room. At some point, it started to feel like even that was not enough because Mom and Dad were spending all of their free time with Catherine. That's when a thought popped into my head that would have seemed crazy to me in the past. I decided to steal money from the family safe, just to prove to myself that I could do something really bad and impossible to miss. I waited until nightfall, sneaked into Dad's study, and entered the password and opened the safe. Mentally, I was already imagining grabbing the money and spending it on something as meaningless as possible, but instead of money, I saw nothing but empty space. That was weird. The money had always been there. Where could it have disappeared? Why hadn't my parents told me anything about it? One of the guys I was now hanging out with was called Hugh. He stood out from the rest of the gang because he wasn't constantly trying to look cool. He knew how to listen, and when he looked at me, I got the strange feeling that I wasn't just the backdrop for someone else's life. I wanted to be with him, and to be honest, I really liked that he was considered the unspoken leader of the whole gang. At first, I just chatted with him more than with the other kids, but soon we started sneaking away from everyone and going for walks together. In the evenings, we wandered in abandoned neighborhoods, climbed on the roofs and sat there, looking at the lights of the cars and houses below. Sometimes, we bought the cheapest coffee from the vending machine and drank it while chatting about all sorts of things. Hugh was always joking and trying to make me laugh. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't need to try to catch someone's attention because he was already listening to me. Meanwhile, things at home kept getting weirder. My parents kept going somewhere with Catherine. Where are you going? It doesn't matter. Don't mind us. That started to bother me. I asked Catherine about it. Catherine, where did you go with Mom and Dad? They asked me not to tell you. My stomach was in knots. One day, when I was hanging out with Hugh and our friends near the mall as usual, Hugh noticed something was wrong. Martha, what's been going on with you lately? I wasn't planning on it, but ended up telling him that everything I did despite my parents, because they didn't notice me and seemed to have cut me out of their lives. Hugh suddenly turned serious and said that his situation was practically the same. My parents are rich businessmen. They believe that money can replace their love. But then why are you hanging out with delinquents? That is the reason why. I do everything to spite my parents. After hearing that, I liked Hugh even more because I suddenly realized that we had more in common than I thought. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at home was weirder than ever. One day I came home and realized that Catherine wasn't there. Anxiety gripped me. I asked Mom and Dad where she was, but they mumbled that everything was fine and tried to quickly change the subject. It was so suspicious that my heart sank. There was no denying it. They were hiding something. The next day, as soon as I saw Hugh, I told him that I needed his help. I didn't understand what was going on with my family. He listened to me and agreed to help. He said he would try to find Catherine and suggested I follow my parents and see where they went. I was scared, but agreed because I didn't have any better ideas. The next day, I followed my parents and saw them arrive at a small house on the outskirts of town. They went inside and after a while, came out and handed some money to a woman. I didn't understand what was going on or why they were giving money to some stranger. At that moment, Hugh called me and told me that he had found Catherine. His voice was strangely strained.
Catherine, your sister is in a hospital.
I ran there faster than I'd ever run before. When I finally found Catherine's ward, my breath caught in my throat. She looked small and pale, but when she saw me, she tried to smile. What happened? Martha, I'm so tired. That wasn't enough for me, so I went out in the hallway, found a doctor, and demanded an explanation. Catherine has a very rare and very dangerous disease, which has been rapidly progressing lately. I'm sorry. I didn't believe a single word he said, because I couldn't accept that my sister was terminally ill. I went back to Catherine, sat next to her, and burst into tears. I was angry with myself for being jealous of her for so long and missing what was really happening right under my nose. When I came home, my head was buzzing like 100 voices had been turned on inside it at once. The door was ajar, and there were suitcases, boxes, and bags in the hallway. Mom and Dad were packing in a hurry. What's going on? Oh, Martha, we're moving to another house. I told them that I knew everything, that I had been to the hospital and seen Catherine. At that moment, Mom couldn't stand it any longer. She covered her face with her hands and burst out sobbing. Dad sat down heavily and told me everything they'd been hiding from me for years. Listen, Martha, Catherine was born with a rare disease. The doctors immediately warned us about it. They said that the disease was dangerous and Catherine probably wouldn't live long. That's why we spent all of our time with her. Every day was precious to us. We spent all our money on her tests, medication, and procedures. We didn't want to scare you and hope that everything would work out somehow. But Catherine's condition has recently gotten worse. We had to sell our house, and now We need to move to a smaller one to have enough money for a treatment. I stood there and listened, and my heart was pounding. All the pieces suddenly fit together, and what I saw made everything both understandable and unbearably painful. I stayed up all night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over everything I'd done in the last few years. All my tantrums, resentment, attempts at revenge. I wanted to sink through the floor. I was angry at myself for being so blind, but at the same time, I knew that I simply hadn't been told the truth, and that made everything even worse. I felt like I wronged both my parents and Catherine. That feeling wouldn't leave me for a second. Soon, we moved into a small, shabby house on the outskirts of town. The rooms were tiny, the furniture was old, and the walls looked like they had witnessed countless lives. We saved on everything, bought the cheapest groceries, turned off the lights if we didn't need them, and visited Catherine in the hospital every day. She was getting worse by the day. She lay down more often than not, talked less. Every time I left her ward, it felt like the air outside was too heavy. I wanted to help my sister, to do something, but I didn't know what, and that only made me more desperate. At that time, I broke off all contact with my friends. There was too much going on. Everything that had felt important now seemed silly and pointless to me. I turned off my phone because I didn't want to talk to anyone and didn't know what to say in such a situation. Then, one day, when I was at home, someone knocked on our door. I opened it and saw Hugh. You're hard to find. You weren't answering your phone, and I didn't know your new address. I had to drive around half the town. I couldn't help but burst into tears right then and there. I told him about Catherine, her illness, our move, and how it was all killing me on the inside. Hugh listened without a word, nodded, and left, only saying that he had something to do. A couple of weeks later, when my parents and I were visiting Catherine in the hospital again, a man I didn't recognize approached us. He introduced himself as a professor from some medical institute. I can help your girl. I want to offer her a new treatment, if you agree, of course. My parents immediately agreed, hardly daring to believe their luck. How did you even find out about our situation? Our mutual acquaintance contacted me and asked me to help. Catherine was transferred to another clinic. She was about to receive experimental treatment, and for the first time in a long time, Mom and Dad had hope in their eyes. One day, when I was sitting in the hallway of that clinic, I saw Hugh and immediately realized who was to thank for our good fortune. You were the one who helped Catherine. I sure was. I asked my dad for help and promised that I wouldn't hang out with my usual crowd anymore. Dad was touched by your story. He contacted his friends at the institute and asked them to help Catherine. I hugged Hugh as tight as I could. I'm glad I met you. Things could have ended very differently without you, Hugh. Over time, Catherine got better. She started to smile, talked more, and even laughed again. The treatment is working, and she will soon fully recover once and for all. My parents were on cloud 9, and so was I, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Later, Hugh asked me out on a date, and I said yes. On that day, he wasn't dressed like a delinquent and looked neat and calm. I've made up with my parents, and I'm not going to live like I used to anymore. Here's what I think. If you're watching this video, remember, don't jump to conclusions. A delinquent can have a big and kind heart, and seemingly indifferent parents might be dealing with tragedies you simply don't know about. Before you get angry and take revenge, you should sometimes try to understand what's really going on.